Speaker's Corner aboard the Villa Vie Odyssey, hosted by Kit Cassingham.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello. Evening, teacher.
No, I'm troublemaker. The other T word.
She's the teacher.
Yeah, she's the teacher. So this is Speaker's Corner. In case you wondered where you were. And I'm Kit Cassingham, in case you hadn't met me. And I want to tell you that Gill is from London. And if you've spoken with her, you may have noticed. And tonight you'll get to hear some more of that beautiful accent of hers. I know you don't think you have the accent, you think I have the accent.
This is true.
Teaching is in her blood, based on, at least from my experience of looking at all the career paths she's had. And among her various degrees, she has a Master of Arts in Politics. Tonight's talk is a far cry from her Oscar Wilde talk. So let's welcome Gill to talk about, she's changed the title on me, World War I propaganda. Welcome, Gill.
Right, okay, there we are with the microphone, which is the first step undertaken, hurrah and huzzah. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Gill, I am from London, and I will endeavour to speak quietly, not quietly, slowly, so that you're able to keep up with my accent if you are not a Londoner yourself. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about World War I propaganda, and I've got a little bit out of my comfort zone in terms of doing this, because my presentation originally was about World War I propaganda, which was specific to the United Kingdom. And given our eclectic audience, I have changed that, but more of that later. So here we go, we're looking at the Great War, World War I, the war to end all wars, if only, 1914 to 1918. Now, it's not my policy to read off PowerPoint slides. I'm going to assume that you can be have some autonomous reading of your own, but I'll point out things that I do want you to focus on. So here we go. So just a reminder of who was on which side. So we have what we would call the Allies, who are actually called the Entente powers, and that's France and Russia until 1917. Of course, 1917 is the Bolshevik Revolution. Russia turned its gaze to that. And then we have Italy coming in at 1915, and then the US came in 1917. And of course, the US at this point, up until 1917, had a policy of neutrality for many, many good reasons. But they were also financing the Allies. So we shouldn't think, there's quite a few jokes in the UK about the Americans coming in late, but we shouldn't dismiss that. They were actually financing some of the war, which is good. And then we have the Central Powers. We've got the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was enormous at this time and had an awful lot of power. And then the German empires, of course, and the Ottoman empires, including Turkey and Morocco. We've got a little snippet from Turkey later. So just a reminder of how it started. Essentially, the third paragraph is where you really want to be, because it was all about alliances and treaties and agreements that various European nations had been involved in. But what sparked it was this shooting of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and he was shot by a Serbian student, and it was escalated because Austro-Hungary decided that Serbia had not acted swiftly enough and had not challenged and prosecuted this student, and so war was declared. And then we were on this path to massive destruction. But I'll remind you that at this point, most European nations assumed that the war would be over by Christmas. They didn't think it was going to escalate until this terrible, terrible bloodshed, which indeed it did. And just if we have a look here, so essentially the Entente powers won the war, but if you look at our losses compared with the Central losses, we have more dead, we've got more wounded, and we've got more missing. So as we all know, war is never without a cost, even if you end up being the victor. So the things I'm going to look at today is I'm going to look at national pride, recruitment, poetry propaganda, demonization of the enemy, and we know how important that is, security, investment, preservation and rationing, help of women, and post-war. So those are the things we're going to be looking at. So here we have the importance of national pride, forgive me. And what we have here is, before World War I, what we were looking at were many, many European and global countries who who actually felt an absolute sense of the greater good. So they would put their own security and the security of their family at risk for the greater good of their country, an immense national pride. If you look at World War II and how conscription was being done then and what propaganda was doing, it was all about the fact that Germany was a terrible, terrible tyrant and they were going to make all of our lives a misery. But now we're going for the greater good, and it's this sense of absolute national pride, loyalty, duty, nobility and sacrifice. And when you have those kind of feelings that are going through people, not just the men who are going to fight, but also the women at home who are supporting the war effort and are telling their fathers, their brothers, their sons to go and fight, that is something that you are not going to be able to get rid of very, very quickly. So the idea of national importance and national pride is of great importance. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about I want to play you two pieces of music, and at this point I will give an apology. I've spent a lot of the day trying to embed these bloody things into my PowerPoint, and I haven't managed to do it. And Walter and I have tested it, but it's a bit of shenanigans. I have to come out of the PowerPoint, play the music, go back into the PowerPoint. So forgive that, it's a technical issue. But just in case you're not British, I just want you to understand the difference between the population in England and the population in Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And you can see that in 1914 England had 36.8 million people, as opposed to Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, which you should never put them together politically, but I could only find a statistic here with them together for 4.3 million. Scotland 4.74 and Wales 2.24 million. So you can see that the England, Ireland and Scotland, Scotland, Ireland and Wales are outnumbered by the English by some amount. And the propaganda posters I'm going to show you are all coming under the Union Jack. Now they were all four across England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. However, I will also show you some that are specific to Scotland because they have a very specific way of being and being Scottish, ditto Wales and ditto Ireland. So we'll have a look at that as well. Now, I want to kind of set the scene for what was going on at the time in Britain. And in case you think this is going to be absolutely British-centric, it isn't, and that's where my comfort zone comes out. I'm very aware of our audiences from Australia, from New Zealand, from South Africa, and of course the US, and I'm going to be delving into your propaganda posters. I am not an expert on your propaganda posters, but what I can see is similarities and things that are showing what is being looked at in terms of various nations and what's important to them at this time. So this, we're talking about 1914. The other thing that we're going to be looking at is the escalation as we go through the war, because things at the beginning of the war, the propaganda at the beginning of the war is essentially about enlisting, recruitment, but as we go through the war it begins to change and it begins to become much more anxious, and we begin then to be looking at rationing, what's going on the home front, and then more alarmist views to try and get people to enlist, because of course everybody at home is just seeing name upon name upon name upon name of loved ones who have perished in this terrible conflict. So we're going to start with the first generation romantic poets. You know I will always go in for a bit of interesting info around and about. And there are two sets of romantic poets. There's a first generation of romantic poets and the second generation of romantic poets. And these guys, William Blake, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Wordsworth. So Blake, Songs of Innocence and Experience is one of his big works. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan. Wordsworth, The Prelude, his 10,000 line magnus opus, which of course he never finished. Wordsworth actually became the poet laureate, and so these guys were very they were rebellious when they first came onto the poetic scene, but very quickly they were taken into the heart of British poetry, and they became grandees and stalwarts therefore. Now Blake here was a really interesting guy. So he wrote a lot of poetry, had a very sound moral compass. He was very critical of the church, he was critical of other bastions of power, and he was also a really good artist. And he wrote a poem called Jerusalem, and later this chap here, Edward Elgar, set it to music. Now, Elgar, we're going to come back to. He's most famous for the Enigma variations, but I also want to point you to Pomp and Circumstance marches, which the American audience will know very well. And I just want to tell you a little bit more about one particular march, because I'm not sure that, I think you hear the music, but you don't actually understand the significance of it, or you don't know the significance of it. Pomp and Circumstance actually comes from Othello. It's a line in Othello, or two words that are picked up in Othello. So here we've got Elgar. So we don't have a massive tradition in the UK of composers. We don't have the Beethovens, we don't have the Brahms, we don't have Handel and Mozart, but we do have Elgar, and he is a bit of a national treasure. So we'll come back to him. So now I'm going to try and play this piece of music, and I'm not going to play all of it, but I'm going to go down to the first two opening stanzas and then the chorus. And what I want you to focus on is this idea of this idealised England that people need to support, people need to love, people need to be part of. And I also want you to think of the rousingness of it. If you think of national anthems around the world, they are massively inclusive. They're trying to get everybody to stand behind their nation. They're trying to get everybody to be as one and be part. So let's see if I can do this without a great load of nonsense. Right, get ready. That was a bit of a balls up, but we will rock and roll with it. So anyway, what we have here are some ideas about England. This idea of greenness, this idea of growth and fertility and pleasant pastures, a real rural community who are bringing food and nostalgia to the people. And of course we've got the religious undercurrent going on here with the Lamb of God. God is looking down on England and is celebrating England. So that's that. So we're going back to Elgar, and we're going back to his Pomp and Circumstances. And here we have Land of Hope and Glory. Now, in America, this is known as the graduation song. And people know the tune, but it's not sung to any of the words that were actually written. This guy here is a very interesting poet. He became a master of one of the Cambridge colleges. And he wrote the words to Land of Hope and Glory. And it was used as part of the coronation of Edward VII. So Edward VII was the eldest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, and this is his coronation here, and this was played there. Now it's got a big intro into it, and I'm just going to try and play this bit here, which is what you are very familiar with, and see if you understand the significance. So what I'm trying to explain here in terms of music is it is a tool for propaganda. So although Jerusalem was written a lot earlier, what it's doing is it's setting a scene for how a nation ought to behave. This was done in 1902, so much nearer to the First World War. And we've got also here this idea of doing everything for your country, the greater good. You are going to sacrifice what you can. So let's have a try with another shambles of this. that should be the last of our musical interludes. Okay, so we're now going to come on to some of the earlier posters for World War I, which were essentially persuading people to enlist. So in all of the countries I'm going to talk about, there is a sense of this national pride. There's a sense of wanting to do what you have to do for your country, and it's a thing that's in your heart, in your soul, in your DNA. And sadly, certainly in the United Kingdom, I think in many other countries in Europe and around the world, that was lost after the war, because the war ended some of those national prides. People thought it had been so badly managed it wasn't worth it, and there'd been some trickery involved. So this is an interesting one, and this is where I come out of my comfort zone, because obviously we've got Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and South Africa. Those are the two South African flags. South Africa fought under both of these flags during the First World War, the blue ensign and the red. And what you'll see here is the call of the empire. So at this point, Britain was still very, very strong, and the words that we used for countries that were allied to them and linked to them were empire and dominion. I'm actually going to use the word Commonwealth as we go forward, because it's less problematic in terms of power structures and in terms of a sort of shame on both sides. So we have here this great big lion that's supposed to represent Britain, and then we have these younger nations of Australia, Canada, New Zealand and South Africa, and we've got this caption here, helped by the young lions, the old lion defies his foes, enlist now. And what happened actually was really astonishing. So all of these countries got straight into the war the minute it was declared by Britain. So the Australians, the Canadians, New Zealanders and South Africa got straight into it. In South Africa there was some conflict, because obviously in South Africa there is a divide between Afrikaans people who come from the Dutch and English people, British people. And the British people were more than happy to support Britain, but the Afrikaans not so much. It wasn't what they wanted to do. They were far more interested in farming and consolidating what they were doing there. So this is an Australian poster, and this poster was actually sent over by Britain. It was originally went through the War Office in London, and it's a very typical at the beginning enlistment propaganda poster. So here we are, there is still a place in this line for you. It's reserved for a fit man, will you fill it? And here it's actually asking a question, it's not demanding, there's no alarmist rhetoric going on there, it's actually asking, will you actually do your duty, will you fill it? And we've got all these other men lined up here in their full kit and caboodle who are doing their right thing. I want to point you to this word fit here. And fit at this point means healthy. You're a healthy person, you can walk on your two legs, you are healthy enough to go to war, and therefore you have a duty to do it. So we're staying with Australia, and this really makes me laugh, because as I said, there's a nuance to how you are going to persuade the people of your nation to come and fight for your nation. And here we have the Aussies, who are very amusing, so cooey, very Aussie phrase. And then down here we've got the German helmet that he's obviously rousted somebody, and here you have some Germans running away because this good guy has seen them off. We see the prevalence of the Union Jack, and the fact that relationships between Britain and the Commonwealth was really strong at that point. There was a real sense of unity and identity and fighting for king and country, and we were all going to support each other. And a really good time in terms of people supporting. We want you at the front. You obviously look at capitals, things getting bigger, underlining for emphasis here, come and help, enlist at once. And that word help, again, it goes to the idea that you need to do your duty, you need to be a good person, and you need to help. Okay, so here again is another Australian one. Again, we've got some Australian lingo here. Give us a hand, old sport. And the Australian ones are interesting because what they're really appealing to your everyday man. You know, Australia at this point was a pretty classless society, and they're really appealing to your everyday man. They're speaking to them in this lingo. This guy here has already been wounded, and he's still fighting. He's holding up his bayonet. He's not going to let go. He's not going to back down. It's got that, you can take it from me, we want more men. And again, it's a direct appeal to for a man on man that is really quite an effective way of persuading people to do your bidding. This also made me laugh, very Australian. Of course, massive surfers there, and we're going to go back to the physical fitness of Australia and the importance of that at this time and in their recruitment. And we can see that this is further on in the war, and we know it's further on in the war because the idea of trench warfare has fed back. So we've got these casualties that are coming back, daily into the countries who are fighting, and then they're beginning to understand the problems of trench warfare. And the problems of trench warfare are manifold. But one of the main things is they got nowhere. They were in a trench and nobody advanced and nobody retreated, and it was just an absolute stalemate that went on for a long, long time, and people ran out of food and they ran out of ammunition, and it was just a terrible way of ridiculous fighting, and things were going back into the powers that be in various countries and saying, look, we need to move forward, and very little happened here. So we know it's further on in the war because of the trenches, but we also know here it's like, yeah, come on guys, what are you doing going out surfing? It's your duty. It's your duty to help your people. Go and help, and that's much more specific. It's not a question, it's a command. Go and help. It's monosyllabic, direct address. And then staying with the Australians, this is a lovely one. So this guy here, Albert Jacker, he was the first Australian to be awarded the Victoria Cross. And this guy was a boxer, and he was very physically fit. And what he's doing here is he's becoming an icon of the sportsmanship of Australians. So you can see here, Australians are really outdoorsy people. They play a lot of sports, they really value physical fitness, and it's very, very important to them as a community, but it's also teamwork. And going back to the previous posters, the Australians are all about teamwork. You're one of us, we are classless. And here we've got physically fit guys, we're playing in a team, we're supporting each other. We've got a natural hierarchy, a captain, but not somebody too important. And then this is it in practice. So he's, beg your pardon, it's not going back. Anyway, this guy was doing the Sportsman's 1000. And here we have an encouragement for Australian men to join the Sportsman's 1000s, join together, train together, embark together, fight together. And there you can see a real sense of camaraderie that is appealing to men of all ages because they want to be part of a gang. Now, when I was a deputy head at a school, I was having to deal with some of the issues about terrorist indoctrination. And Britain got some really quite severe legislation that you had to deal with any kind of thoughts of indoctrination. And at that time we were looking at ISIS indoctrination, and they were indoctrinating in this way about wanting to be part of a team, not being left out, all of those things. So we can see this idea of propaganda is still with us today. So now we come on to Canada, and we can see here the prevalence of the Union Jack. The Canadian stuff is really interesting because it's very moral and it's very clear, and the Canadians don't mess around with stuff. Here we've got obviously appealing to the French Canadians, wanting to make sure that they're seeing everybody in Canada. This is interesting. British blood calls British blood. Sons of Britain and Canada, resident in the United States, join your army here, enlist now, and we've got our flags going on there. And so they're appealing to Canadians all over the world in order to try and get them to come and join the fight. As I said, the Canadians went in very quickly and very, very willingly. Here we've got one that you saw in Britain as well. This came over from Britain into Canada, and they have adapted it for their people. And you can see it's sort of reminiscent, I think, really, of some of the pioneering that was happening in America all those that time ago. But this is from Ottawa and Ontario. And again, the Canadians are very specific about their provinces. They know that if they can appeal to people in different provinces, they will get a good response. This one is one of the few that we have photographs here. We've got an older woman, a matriarch, and it's very, very clear, go. So later poster, we know that there is a call to arms going on there. It's your duty, lad. She's got her arm around him. She's telling him what he has to do, and she's saying, join today. There's no time to lose. You've got to go, and you've got to save the rest of the Canadians who are at the front. And here we go to New Zealand. I actually updated this earlier, and I'm going to ignore this because I've got a horrible feeling it's actually World War II. So we'll go on to this one. So New Zealand, very straightforward. Come into the ranks and fight for your king and country. Don't stay in the crowd and stare. Got the Union Jack there. you are wanted at the front, enlist today. So a sense of urgency going on there, and a show of what the other Kiwi soldiers are doing. They're marching forward, they're doing the duty, and other people should. This one I really like, and if I hadn't picked this up with this date here, I would have thought it was a much later poster, because it has a sense of modernity about it that I would have thought maybe it was a World War II poster, but we have our proof there. So this is a war dog of New Zealand. What I like about it is, firstly, it's got this idea of the union between New Zealand and Britain, but also the moralry stuff here on this dog. So it's quite frightening, but they're taking everything they can about the New Zealand nation. And we know that the Maldives are really quite warlike sometimes in the way that they behave with their hackers and whatnot. So here again, New Zealand, very straightforward, very careful, and very legislative about what they're doing. We've got here a preparation for conscription, which is coming into force in 1916, but this is actually November 1915. They're telling their nation what is happening, how it's happening. It's very detailed. It's got warnings, talks about fines and imprisonment, personal schedule, very clear, no way of getting around that. And of course, in wartime, information becomes really garbled at times, and it is not clear and straightforward. So for the New Zealanders to be this clear on what they're doing about something that is massively contentious is very impressive. This is South Africa, and for any South Africans in here, I apologise, but you don't have that many propaganda tools. Your propaganda tools seem to have been overwritten by apartheid stuff, and so there's very little that seems to have stayed in South Africa. But this is interesting. You can help to build a gun. South Africa at this time was really a nation of farmers, and so a lot of people would have owned guns and would have been looking after their land, protecting their land, shooting things that were getting their crops. You can learn quickly and you'll be working to win. So very kind of bold statement from the South Africans here. They are a competitive nation. Here we've got an idea of looking at the Germans and being quite critical of them. Interestingly, the Germans did try and invade South Africa, but they made a bit of a muff of it. They kind of got in at the west, but the South Africans routed them, and then they tried to go in on the east, and this is in the middle of this conflict, and the South Africans routed them. They didn't put enough effort in, they didn't have enough troops, they didn't have enough resources, so the South Africans saw them off. And actually, you don't really want to come up against South Africans. They're quite a strong nation who are not afraid of getting stuck in terms of aggressive stuff. Here we've got one of the ones that we're going to talk about later, and we're talking about vengeance. We're talking about how you deal with a war when the war in your mind has not been fought in a just manner. And so here we have a man, he's doing his bugle, he's calling for help, people to come and help him, and we have this woman, possibly dead, prostrated, but she's also a nurse. We see that from her Red Cross, and the moral implication that this man would have killed a nurse who was there to help, and she's a woman in the 1914 to 1918 is an aberration to most people. So very, very forceful poster there. And then at the bottom, what's it all about? Well, they're recruiting. So you go and you protect these women who are trying to look after the men at the front. And then this is the UK, typical thing here. We've got the pointing finger. We'll see that again and again. It's about, it's you. We want you. We're pointing at you, and you cannot escape us. If you know anything about art, you will know that very often people will not look out of the painting into the audience unless there's a specific reason for it, and this is a specific reason. As a proper stance, he's got his Union Jack waistcoat, he's got his men there who are supporting him, and he's literally saying you, and it's this guilt who's absent, and it's you. Now if you go back to Jerusalem, this is England's green and pleasant land. This is exactly what people were fighting for. You've got your crops there, it's rural, it's idyllic, sunshine, lazy days, lots of bread and cheese at lunchtime, chocolate box thatched roofs there, little cottages, and that is quintessential England that they're being asked to fight for. your country's call, isn't this worth fighting for, enlist now. And we can see that that's an early poster, because the language is not alarming enough. It's asking you a moral question, it's asking you a national question, is this worth fighting for? But here we move on to a slightly darker one. We've got this 2 children and this father, Daddy, what did you do in the Great War? And he's looking guilty and pensive, and as if he hasn't done what he should have done. And he's going to have to face these children later and tell them that he hasn't done his duty. He hasn't done what is expected of men at this time. He has been cowardly. And what we also have here is the son is showing him how he should be behaving, because the son is working with these soldiers and with this cannon going on there, and the father has not done his duty. So a massive amount of guilt going on there. Here, these are going on in the war. It's an appeal to you. The word appeal is emotive. It's asking you, it's pleading with men to go and help. And then we've got Britannia coming out with her sword of justice. And you know, the British have always had this real sense of things have to be just, things have to be right, and justice must be served at all causes. More pointing there, your country needs you, and then using women to actually say, you are not men to us if you don't go and do your duty. So we are saying, you need to go and fight. We've got the women, they're looking out, we've got the soldiers going past. Who is missing there? There are people missing, they should be there. And then we've got a son, and he's there with his possibly his mother and his sister, and we know later, if the war goes on long enough, he will be there, and they will support him doing it. And then as the war escalates, we've got some really problematic stuff. Holt, who goes there, are you a friend? Join the British ranks and help the brave lads at the front. So brave lads at the front, are you a friend? If you are not at the front, you are not a friend, you are not a friend of Britain. And you can see the actual quality of these posters has gone downhill. These are rushed. These are just knocked up very, very quickly. We don't have anything like the kind of iconography that we've got earlier, the language that we've got earlier. These are just, right, get on with it, you've got to go and fight. And similarly here, too much information here, it's not thought through at all. Men of Britain, will you stand for this? And then they talk about, there's loads of stuff there, nobody's going to have the time to read that. There's rationing going on, people are really trying hard to just get their lives in order, and then they're talking about women and children who are killed, and of course they will talk about women and children because people care about women and children being killed. And then at the front, every fit Briton should join our brave men at the front, enlist now, and that was one of the ones that we saw earlier. Okay, this is an Irish one, so I said I would put in a few from Ireland and Wales and Scotland. So she's in national Irish dress. They're talking about Belgium, and the reason that Belgium is such a bone of contention is because Belgium was neutral, and the Germans invaded Belgium, and that's why Britain declared war, because they'd gone into Belgium, which was neutral, and it should have stayed neutral, and they weren't able to do it. So she's saying, for the glory of Ireland, will you go or must I? And essentially, if she's saying a woman would go and fight instead of a man, that is a big call to somebody to go and do their duty. This is similar to the Jacker Australian one. Here's this guy here, Michael O'Leary, and he has defeated 10 Germans, and he's got the Victoria Cross for Valour, and he's become a poster chap who could persuade other Irishmen to go and do their duty and to do it as well as they are. These are Scottish ones. Scottish, very much honour and glory of the British Empire. And then one of the things about the Scottish is they're still quite clan-like in the way that they view Scotland, and they're quite geographical. Scotland is massive in terms of how many people live there, how few people live there, and how much land there is. And so in Scotland, the place that you live is actually very important, and some of these places are really quite insular. So to get people to be with their local countrymen, we've got the startings of the Scottish flag there, is a way of recruiting the Scots, and their national pride in their uniform is also of great importance. This is Irish. I'll go to the real Irish spirit, very good stuff going on there. Back to the Scots, they've got their uniform there. Your king and country needs you, enlist now. And then this is Welsh, and actually written in Welsh. And ironically, even in 1914, not that many people really speak Welsh, but they like to keep the language alive. It's a real driving force in Wales. And so this is a Welsh poster to try and get Welsh people to come in. Now, this is from the US, and this is interesting because this is 1915, so we've got 2 more years of neutrality before the US joins the war. But we'll see here, as I said, they were putting money in, but we'll see here, the US don't want people to think they're afraid. They don't want people to think they're cowardly. So this says, I'm neutral, but not afraid of any of them. And here we have Britain, we've got the German Dachshund there, we've got the French Bulldog there, and the Russian Wolfhound. I can't really read that. But US is saying, listen, we're still in the game on this one. So that was quite an interesting find to come across. And then in that same year, in 1915, the Germans sunk the Lusitania, and that killed 128 US citizens. And after 1915, the United States began to think again about their policy of neutrality. It's very difficult because you had all sorts of competing people in the country, and competing religious ideas and competing economic ideas. But by the same token, they began to become more and more concerned about the might of the German empires which were going against them. So this was important. And this poster, as you can see, it is a woman sinking down into the ocean with a baby clutched in her arms, and there's just one word, enlist. And so very, very striking poster from the US. Then this is really, again, typical of the US. We've got obviously the flag on this lady. Wake up, America! It's a demand. We've got to get into it. We've got to get. We're a bit behind on the times, and we've got to get cracking quickly. And then they use this word civilization, and we would assume that we are civilized. The Entente powers are civilized, and the others are uncivilized. And we'll come to the way that they were the foe were demonized later. And we want every man, woman, and child to be part of this war effort in their own way. This caption down here reads "The True Sons of America," and of course, you know, lots of iconography going on there, and it really would speak to most Americans to make them feel that they need to be part of this solution. This is quite a jaunty one. Like American stuff is normally quite, again, it's like a bit like Canada, the Canadian stuff. It's kind of quite moral and straightforward, and later we'll go on get onto some very, very straightforward advice and instruction from the US. But this is quite nice. Jaunty sailor, jaunty soldier, and then a guy who's staying behind to fix the loo. I don't know. Together we win. So that is good. Now, this is a Turkish response to some of what was going on here. And they're talking about the Australian New Zealand soldiers. You have been tricked. You cannot win. You can only die here, far from home, or suffer from hunger and thirst. The English, insatiable in their desire to dominate, will waste your lives in their vain attempt at glory. Which is pretty ironic, given that actually the war wasn't started by Britain. But that was quite funny. I quite like finding that. Now, so we've looked at music as a tool of propaganda. We've looked at posters as a tool of propaganda. We're going to see some more posters. Well, I just want to tarry a bit and look at the war poets. So when people had heard that I was going to be doing something on World War I propaganda, a couple of people said, oh, you know, what's your expertise in this? Now, as it happens, if you're teaching a period of literature, you have to know the context that has shaped that piece of literature. You have to know the philosophy that's going on at the moment, the history that is in the past, religious issues that are going on, and all sorts of things. So in order to teach literature properly, you have to know what's going on at that time and what has led to this particular moment in history. But also, I taught World War I poetry. I was teaching in an academically selected school. It's really rigorous, and I needed to prepare students to be able to get the highest possible grades, and they could only do it if they really understood what was shaping World War I poetry. And I would suggest that the British World War I poetry is the best in the world, but the next person I'm going to talk about after Rupert Brooke is actually a Canadian. So this guy here was considered to be one of the most handsome men in Britain. He was a scholar and a poet, and he was really, really idealistic. He died in 1915. I'd like to tell you that he died a very brave death, defending himself, but actually he was stung by a mosquito, and it gave him septicemia, and he died. So it was a bit of a shame. Now, fear not, I'm not going to read you a load of old poetry, but at the beginning of the war, he wrote this. It's called The Soldier. It's a really patriotic poem. And again, we're talking about England, but really it kind of means Britain. But he says here, if I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. So in his mind, his sacrifice, the sacrifice of his life, not only is worth it, but it also spreads Englishness around the globe. And then the poem goes on, and it's really very, very beautiful, but it's massively idealistic at the beginning of the war. Then we come to John McCrae. He too didn't survive the war. He was a poet and a surgeon. He's a Canadian, and he died of pneumonia, sadly, in 1918, so shortly before the end of the war. And he's very famous for this poem, In Flanders Fields. And this is 1915. And what he's saying here is, look, things are bad. Things are really bad. We've had some terrible losses. Loads of people have died. But you know what? If you don't take up our quarrel, then we have died in vain. So in the middle of the war, his propaganda, his poetry is saying, yes, we've got to keep fighting, because otherwise people have died in vain. So we have him. And then we have poor old Wilfred Owen, amazing poet, lots and lots of life story about him. He died a week before armistice was signed, and he was shot in the head. And it's such a terrible, terrible shame. And by the time he was writing his poetry, he was furious and critical. And he was saying, look, what passing bells for these who die as cattle? He's critical of all of the people in power who are sending these men to their death like herds of cattle. Nobody's listening, nobody cares. It's all about just keeping in those trenches and getting these ridiculous routes that they used to send them on to do, and it's a terrible, terrible waste of these lives. So Anthem for Doomed Youth, interestingly, it was written in a hospital called Craiglockhart in Scotland. It's quite a famous hospital because it was one of the guys there was the first person to recognise shell shock, and it's now part of the Edinburgh Napier University, but that's where he wrote it. And then we've got the symbol of the white feather, and so essentially if you were a man around about, say from 1915 onwards, and you weren't in military uniform, you could be at risk of being given a white feather, which was a symbol of cowardice. And that meant that you were a coward, you weren't prepared to do your duty, you didn't care about the greater good, you weren't going to do anything. And this is a very, very shameful thing. Now, if you think about it, in all of the countries involved in this war, people were staying at home to be doctors, they were staying at home to work the land, they were staying at home to work factories for munitions. So it was a very problematic way of going about things, and not particularly useful at all. And then we've got this idea of demonising the enemy. This is an Australian one, and this is directly for women of Queensland. Remember how women and children of France and Belgium were cheated. Do you realise that your treatment could be worse? We've got her bare-breasted here, very, very unusual for this time to show a bare-breasted woman. This dishevelment suggests rape, and we'll go on to other posters that are suggesting rape. And then we've got children dead at her feet. And they're saying to her, send a man today. You know, you send your husband, your son, your father, you send anybody to fight for this. And that's a very shocking poster at that time to be shown. This is again quite a shocking one. We've got obviously the German helmet, so the Hun, it's some sort of gorilla beast, and then this question mark. What will happen? There's Australia down there. What will happen if nothing happens, if Europe is not helped, if the Entente powers are not helped? And then this is New Zealand. So this is New Zealand. Will you fight now or will you wait for this? So again, they've got this guy here on his knees begging for mercy. We've got somebody down here who's been killed. We've got the Germans shoving their guns in this guy. They're going to kill him. There's no two ways about this. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? Who's going to do it? Again, the idea of Belgium. Remember Belgium, enlist today. By this time, there's just no way to say too much more. Things are hotting up. They need to get these posters out. They need to get more people on the front line. And then this is a British one, and again it's a later one, and you can see that they're scrabbling around. They've got too much text on there. It's basically our homes are secure, our mothers and wives are safe, our children still play and fear no harm. And then we're talking about Belgium. Their homes are destroyed, their women are murdered and worse, i.e. again rape. Their children are dead or slaves, and then back at the men who have saved you. This one's quite interesting because it's about humiliation. So supposedly the Germans captured these soldiers and then they shaved their half their head and half their beard and took them through the town. And we've got this alliteration, how the Hun hates, going on there for emphasis. And then this one is supposed to be a German nurse. Here's a British soldier begging for water, and she pours the water out in front of him. And here they're saying there is no woman in Britain who would do it. There is no woman in Britain who will forget it. So they're making a real separation between the way that women behave, not just about the way that men behave. And then we've got security. Now this one is a Kiwi one, and I think actually this is a World War II poster. But I've kept it in here for two reasons. First of all, it's very funny. Keep quiet no matter where you hang out. They're obviously there having a pee, got stuff hanging out of their shorts. They're hanging out together. So lots of camaraderie going on there. And in World War I, you have to work really hard to get posters about security because people weren't that worried about it in terms of secrets getting out, because communication was just not what it was by the time we went into World War II. By World War II, if you're looking at security posters and security propaganda, you'll see absolutely loads of it because they're really concerned about spies, about information coming out, about people not being who they say they are, but not so much in World War I. However, this is an interesting one. This is an American one, and we've got obviously Kaiser Wilhelm here, that's him down there, as a spider. Don't talk, the web is spun for you with invisible threads, keep out of it, help to destroy it, stop, think, ask yourself if what you are about to say might help the enemy. Spies are listening. And there's a real sense of paranoia here that I think you can see a few decades later in America, in terms of some of the conflicts they had in the Cold War, this kind of idea of paranoia, which is prevalent. Then we've got, obviously, as the war goes on, people are running out of money, they don't have enough food, the government needs to be propped up with war bonds, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. We've got here Australia, they're pretty good, they've got a carnival going on, and so they're trying to raise some money there for wounded soldiers, that's pretty good. This is an interesting one for Canada. So here in 1918, essentially the Germans sunk this ship here, the Llandovery Castle, and that actually had Red Cross stickers on it. So there's no way that anybody should have tried to sink it, but the Germans did, and this was a toll of 146 officers and 14 Canadian nurses. And here at the bottom here, we've got culture, or Kultur, versus humanity. Now this is a German word for culture, but it doesn't just mean culture, it actually means a superior culture. And it's the kind of thing that you see in the Second World War with the kind of Aryan propaganda that goes on at that point. So there's this idea that even then the German people are superior and there is this culture that they are part of. But the Canadians are having none of that, and they're saying, like, culture versus humanity, what are you talking about? We're not this. This is not how you treat humanity. This is not about culture. So that's quite an interesting one. Here, if you cannot join him for whatever reason, maybe you're wounded, then you should do your bit at home and you should help the women and children. Here we've got Canadians, they're also doing something nice. They're doing an art show to try and raise some money, and they're also saying, give a life and save a life, work for the Red Cross. Then we've got a New Zealand one, come on New Zealand, victory loans. They're trying to get people to put some money into New Zealand. Similarly here, protect New Zealand, get some national savings. And then this is an interesting one because it has a photograph. We've obviously got this nurse, she's looking after this guy. It's very poignant. It makes us feel that they've used the word mercy, and so it makes us feel really as if we're in the middle of this. And then this idea of just having one part of a picture depicted in a different colour is something that we still use now in terms of marketing, and movies, films is still used for emphasis. This British one's very clear, write a cheque today, national war bonds. This one to present this, i.e. these people whipping the British public. Here you need to buy war savings. This is a Welsh one, so Welsh Flag Day, they're trying to get some money in. And then this is an American one using obviously the iconic Statue of Liberty that's being broken down here, meaning that liberty is perishing, and they're saying which shall not perish from the earth, and they're going to fight everything to make sure that that doesn't occur. And then we've got some rationing and saving. Canadian one, very straightforward, an older woman showing a younger woman how to preserve things. They're using glass jars, preparing for the winter. Obviously Canada has bad winters, and save perishable foods. And then this one about not hoarding food. Canadians have a real sense of justice, so you're not to hoard any food. And then this is quite nice, SOS, Soldiers of the Soil, and this is trying to get some of the people, the boys, the younger boys, to stay on the farm and to keep farming and making sure that the produce keeps coming. British one, coal, we've still had coal fires there, you need to use less coal. Here you need to eat less bread, you need to preserve here, so the Canadians are using glasses, the British are using cans. Then there's also about eggs, big collections for wounded soldiers. And then this is one of the American ones that I talked about earlier. If you think about America at this time, you've got a lot of people who've come through Ellis Island, lots of people from different cultures all over the world, speaking all sorts of different languages. And this is very careful, the information they're giving. Right, save wheat, use more corn. So what you need to do and how you do it. Meat, use more fish and beans, how you do it. Fats, use just enough. Sugar, use syrups, and serve the cause of freedom. And then this is really, really quite sweet. Food, buy it with thought, cook it with care, use less wheat and meat, buy local foods, serve just enough, use what is left, don't waste it. Really straightforward advice there, which is quite interesting that they're able to do that on a poster and appeal to all the sort of different nations that were in the US at that time. And then we've got the help of women. This is an Australian one. Essentially these women are saying, yes, we want the reinforcement vote, and they're going to support it. In Britain, we need a lot of people in England's green and pleasant land to plough the furrows. The Women's Land Army needs to work. And then we've got every fighter, a woman's worker in New York. And then we're coming to the end now. We've got post-war, it's New Zealand. Interestingly, they're looking at the medals that were won in Britain and the important men who were fighting in Britain. Ditto the important men fighting in New Zealand. Britain's got the lead there rather than New Zealand, and they are celebrating all of the things. And it's interesting because very, very few countries celebrated in this manner. They celebrated the end of the war and they celebrated the end of the death and destruction, but they didn't necessarily celebrate military prowess, because actually people were too jaded, they were too upset by it all, they were too tired and weary. So that's interesting. And then we have another New Zealand one, and he's using a quotation from Flanders Fields, but it's not the right quotation. So he says, if you break faith, we shall not sleep. The actual quotation is, if you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep. But they're saying buy victory bonds. So at the end of the war, the Kiwis are saying, look, we still need to have some money put in so that we can actually rebuild New Zealand. And one of the great disasters that happened at the end of the World War I was that the countries were so depleted in terms of their economy, in terms of what had happened with men who had died, in terms of the rack and ruin that had happened whilst this war that should have been over before Christmas occurred, that they did not actually do any forward thinking about rebuilding after the First World War. Now, if you look around after the Second World War, lessons were learned, and you can see that the prefabs for bombing that was happening were coming up really, really quickly, but there was not enough rebuilding that happened after World War I. Here's an American one. We've got good old Uncle Sam there, offers training to every man disabled in the service. See that your man takes it. Woman's responsibility to make sure that her husband, brother, son, father, gets disability allowance and works with the Red Cross, facing the future. But again, there are very, very few posters about the victory, about how people are going to get better after that. And that, my friends, is it. So ramble through. So I hope you haven't blundered on any of your kind of national things in a way that Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians and South Africans work. I haven't blundered on any of that. If anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Yes, I sort of was noticing the lack of any real explicit religious aspect. That
Yeah.
God is on our side.
Yeah,
Except for that Jerusalem hymn.
yeah.
Really nothing else was bringing up religion.
So we have religious references in some of the poetry, but it wasn't put on the posters. Now, if you're looking, like loads of these posters come from the UK, or they are they are made for another country, but the UK stuff is going on. Now, the United Kingdom has a very checkered history with religion, which goes back to Tudor Britain, whereby we stepped away from the Catholic faith and became Protestants, and then became very, very secular. And so there are a couple of posters which go back to the Crusades, but they weren't useful enough for me to put on there. There are only a couple of them, and they didn't quite fit the propaganda mode. So essentially, the British tend to stay away from religion. But I'm surprised that there wasn't more in America, because America is not a secular country, and I would have thought that there would be more religious comment in America, but I couldn't find any. But I thought exactly the same thing.
It's less secular now than it always was secular.
Okay, there you go.
I'll just brief thing on the religious thing since I've been to seminary. American religiosity actually was pretty low in the early 20th century. Like, people talked about it. Churchmanship wasn't high until after World War II. There was a big spike after World War II, and then it kind of petered off again. So America's history of being universally Christian is greatly overstated by conservative Christians.
Okay, thank
That'll
you.
help explain that a
Again,
little bit.
out of my comfort zone with that kind of thing. So I was surprised about it, but you've explained that brilliantly. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.